Okay, I gotta get dressed.
You have a suit?
Yeah, maybe, sorta. We'll see.
Welcome back, true believers and all you merry Marvelites, to another very interesting Marvel games related video. More of a laid back discussion as you would expect with these amazing collabs that I have done on the channel previously, because I do have yet again another amazing special guest with me on the channel today who has been featured in several collabs in the past, who I am once again extremely honored to talk to with this video, going over the future of Marvel games coming from Electronic Arts, which we will dive into in just a bit. But today I am joined by the one and only Irogen, who you obviously know from a lot of videos on the channel that we have done pertaining to Marvel games, but also his own amazing channel, and is a famously renowned developer of his own individual independent video game. What's up, Jake? How you doing today?
I am doing so good. Thank you so much for having me on. It is always a blast being on the amazing Filarca channel to talk Marvel. So let's get into this one.
So yeah, Jake and I are back once again to talk about Marvel games, but with a twist, because as you all know, or maybe if you forgot, we have a lot of Marvel games in store that are not coming just from PlayStation with the upcoming Marvel Spider-Man 2, or Marvel's Wolverine, and even the other Marvel game that we do know about with the Captain America and Black Panther game from Skydance New Media. But in this case, we're talking about the partnership that was previously confirmed to be happening between Marvel Games and Electronic Arts, where, in case you forgot, this was their official press release that Marvel Games stated on Halloween of last year, where they went on to say, "We are thrilled to announce a multi-title collaboration between Marvel and EA to develop action-adventure games for consoles and PC. Each game will also be its own original story set in the Marvel Universe." And in case you want to learn more details about the ins and outs of this deal, I did do a video about it breaking down everything that you need to know, so definitely be sure to check that out if you haven't already. But as you should know, the first game within this partnership is going to be with Iron Man, which is developed by Motive Studios, who, if you are aware, is currently developing the Dead Space remake and also previously released Star Wars Squadrons. Also, in the case of this deal, is that whatever other game that Marvel and EA are planning to develop, it has to be from a developer who is owned by the Electronic Arts game publisher umbrella. Like, for example, Respawn Entertainment is currently developing the sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order of Jedi Survivor, and they are a developer who is owned by EA, and the same thing goes for Motive Studios. So whatever developer comes next for this EA Marvel Games deal has to be a developer directly owned by EA, which might make this selection a bit limiting, especially depending on which hero they decide to make a game on next, but the possibilities that are surrounding this deal in general are pretty much limitless, which makes it a very exciting time for die-hard Marvel game fans. For you, Jake, what are your thoughts on this deal between Marvel and EA in general, and which hero or heroes would you like to see receive their own game next?
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of intrigue in terms of what EA could do going forward with the Marvel brand and their studios. It's been proven time and time again that the Arkham formula is a successful method by which a superhero game can be created, where you have an open world, a main campaign, and side missions. We've seen that repeated in Spider-Man with Insomniac's own twist on the formula, but recently we've also seen games like Batman the Telltale series and other ones like Guardians of the Galaxy that have shown that there can be successful formulas that do not copy and paste what Activision did with their earlier Spider-Man games or what Rocksteady did with their Batman Arkham franchise. And I do think that EA is in a position where they could easily branch outside of the regular superhero gameplay formula and craft new experiences like we saw with Guardians of the Galaxy. That one blew me away. I had zero expectations for the game. And with Iron Man, I think that's a great first step into building a new set of Marvel games from EA. And there's a lot of potential there. That was a character that I felt lacked some of his kinetic energy in the Marvel's Avengers game from Square Enix. And I'm excited to see a whole game dedicated just to that character. rather than that character being delegated to just being one of many playable characters that felt slightly underwhelming in a game. So in terms of the IPs that I'd like to see from EA, I feel that there's a lot of directions that they could go. In one sense, you could go with the very traditional choices. You could go with Captain America, you could go with Thor, or I also think that there are characters like Doctor Strange who could make for a very compelling gameplay experience outside of the norm. I'd really like to see some of the visual and gameplay elements that they could introduce to a character like Doctor Strange, and that's a character that we just don't see in the video game space all that often.
A Doctor Strange game would be totally awesome, and I would love to see him get his own time in the spotlight with his own standalone game compared to what we recently saw with Doctor Strange and Marvel's Midnight Suns. But I'm also really glad that you brought up Marvel's Avengers, Jake, because of how Square Enix, or more specifically Crystal Dynamics in this case, who are the main developers behind that project, really tried to have their cake and eat it too when it came to that game, because there's so many different characters that they tried to develop for one singular experience, which just ended up being a live service, brawler-oriented based game with not a lot of variety when it came to what you did in terms of the gameplay itself. And when it came to the combat, the main core Avengers that you started off with when the game first released did feel slightly different in variation, but then Jane Foster Thor and Winter Soldier being pretty much copy-paste clones of Captain America and the normal Thor. And while there was a very interesting inclusion with Black Panther and Spider-Man in the mix as well, they obviously didn't feel as good if they were to be featured, in this case, in their own standalone games. Like, obviously, you would want to play Insomniac's Spider-Man games, either the PS4 game, the remaster, or Miles, in comparison to playing as Spider-Man in an Avengers game like the one that we got, because it is a solely dedicated game focused on that singular character, which is why you'll always get the better experience when focusing on one titular character, like what we got with the Batman Arkham games and, of course, Insomniac's Spider-Man. Or, in another case, with Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, the only playable character in that game was Star-Lord, where the other Guardians were just side characters that you could command on the side instead of directly controlling them as the main playable character, which is another reason why that game is so much more successful compared to Avengers. But if EA is starting off with a heavy-hitting character like Iron Man, even though we already saw him in a AAA Avengers game, that totally leaves the door open for maybe, like you said, Jake, a standalone Thor game or a standalone Captain America game, giving them their own dedicated experiences that will showcase exactly what makes them so special in comparison to having them be a bit overshadowed in a team-up game like what Avengers was. So in this case, when coming from EA, it really makes me want to see what other types of superheroes would fit the strengths of the developers. Like, for instance, if Respawn were to make a Marvel game, since they're already doing such a great job with the Star Wars franchise with the Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor game that's coming out relatively soon, I think based on their own skill sets, a Daredevil game from them would be absolutely incredible. And another developer is BioWare, who are mostly known for the incredible Mass Effect franchise. Imagine them tackling a type of sci-fi-centric standalone Captain Marvel game taking place in the cosmic verse of the Marvel world. That would be incredible. And just those types of opportunities are pretty much unlimited at this point with this EA Marvel deal. Another one of my favorites is Marvel Nemesis Rise of the Imperfects. I know a lot of people may not remember that game as well, but that's a straight up banger in my opinion, and if we were to get a sequel, it would be the sequel of the century, especially since of how underrated I think that game is. Allowing an older franchise like that to be revived with this new deal is definitely a possibility, which makes it all the more interesting to see what the final results will be.
I think that the great thing about EA, as you've mentioned, is the variety between the developers. DICE is great with their first-person shooter titles, and Respawn has proven themselves as really compelling third-person adventure storytellers with their Jedi Fallen Order series. I feel that going forward, that will be the strength in EA's continued relationship with Marvel, especially if they are looking to extend this deal beyond these 3 initial games. I feel that allowing these different developers to shine with characters that really suit them would create for some very compelling gaming experiences. You've mentioned that Respawn would probably do a really solid job with Daredevil, and I agree. I also could see them doing a Last of Us style Hulk game where you're playing as Bruce Banner, maybe trying to find a cure for your condition, and building out some really compelling character beats while also having some really fun action combat to play through. I also feel, like I mentioned earlier, branching out and not just following the same Arkham formula that we've seen for many games in the past is a key to success, and allowing these developers to craft their own unique experiences tailored to the characters that they are working with.
And the great thing about this deal is again, these new games after Iron Man are apparently all going to be in the action-adventure genre. So for anyone who is worried about receiving another type of live service, heavily monetized microtransaction-filled game like Marvel's Avengers, for example, or any other type of EA game in particular that you might know from their past business practices, it really looks like EA, in this case with Marvel, is turning over a new leaf and is focusing on what Jake mentioned earlier, on the formula that works best for these AAA superhero games. That, of course, is being the single-player, narrative-driven, action-adventure-oriented, and possibly open-world experience. Those are the games that do the best when it comes to the general consumers, and knowing that the majority, if not all of these games from EA and Marvel are going to fit in that category, in my opinion, leaves me extremely reassured, especially if you have heard all the details that Motive have brought up with their vision for how they're going to handle Iron Man. They sound extremely passionate about the project and makes me, as a fan and as a gamer, even more hyped to see where that project could go by the time we see more of it. And especially, that goes double for what these next Marvel games are going to be within the EA production pipeline.
Absolutely. I think that Marvel, as you mentioned, have learned their lesson with Avengers. I think Avengers was an experiment that maybe was not the smartest choice at the onset, but I don't think that it was necessarily one that wasn't worth trying. I know that was a very convoluted way of saying that, but basically it boils down to, I think Avengers was trying to achieve a very different goal than the Arkham games or the Spider-Man games. With that being said, I think that one huge disastrous stroke that EA could make when developing these Marvel games is to not really let these characters shine in their individuality. I think that a Thor game has a lot of potential, but I think that to essentially just turn it into a God of War ripoff wouldn't really do any favors to the IP. I think that allowing Thor to explore Asgard and act as an acting king even, and allowing you to counsel with your friends or to go and complete missions that citizens of Asgard have asked you to help them with would allow the character some individuality from the God of War series. All of this is ultimately to say that getting games for characters that are essentially just borrowing elements from previous games isn't what is going to sell these games. The thing that made Arkham so successful, and similarly the thing that has made Spider-Man so successful, is that they are unlike any other games releasing on the market right now. They have their own personalities and gameplay mechanics that you just don't get by playing a first-person shooter or by playing any other third-person action-adventure game. There's things in the Arkham series that you don't get by playing Uncharted. Similarly to how when you play Uncharted, you get a lot of aspects that you don't get when playing the Batman Arkham series. In order for EA to truly succeed with Marvel, I really think they just need to push forward what makes these characters so unique and interesting. And there's a wonderful roadmap for success, and it's been shown to us by previous developers. I think we've seen what works and what doesn't work, and I hope that Marvel and EA can move forward in a awesome direction for Marvel going forward. Nuff said.
And with all that said, everybody, that is the video that Irogen and I both have for you today. Let us know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think about this current deal between Marvel Games and Electronic Arts? Are you extremely hyped for where this deal could go and what games we could get out from them? Or are you a bit hesitant for this deal considering EA's track record and what they could do for a character like Iron Man in a negative way instead of a positive way? Let us know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. Leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy, and for more Marvel Games videos like this in the future. And I could not do this amazing collab without the one and only Irogen joining me today. Thank you so much, Jake. I had a wonderful time.
Thank you so much for having me on. It is always a pleasure to chat Marvel stuff with you.
And until next time, true believers, stay merry Marvelites, and peace out.